So hello and welcome to all the panelists, our speakers for today, and all of you who have joined us for this Teamlease Marathon webinar, which is an Independence Day special, which we are doing today. Basically, to understand a topic which is hot right now in India and across the globe is gig workforce and gig economy. I think the gig economy is exploding across the globe and in India, whereas obviously, so the developing nations have a lot of startups, and so that's why the flexibility of work and there are a lot of people who wants to have different opinions on gig economy and gig workforce. Today we have Miss Eleanor Tucker from Ganghart from UK. She's joining us from UK. We have Dr. Anil Kumar Mishra, who's the CHRO for magicbricks.com. And we have Mr. Vinay Trivedi, who's the CHRO of ToneTag. Welcome all. Thank you. Thanks for taking your time out. So we'll kind of start with before the questions. We kind of start with a perspective on what is that we mean by gig economy. I think let's start with Ms. Tucker. If you can unmute yourself. Yes. Yeah. Hi.
Hi there. Thank you for the lovely introduction there. So I think I was actually thinking about the term gig and gig economy and how that had evolved. And I think it's quite interesting because we have a term in the UK, which I'm sure is used elsewhere, where a gig originally meant just a small piece of work, and also meant a concert or a performance, a music gig as well. So it always just meant a small job that you might do. I think that's evolved now because technology has, taken a forefront, and it's become to mean more than that. And a gig platform is obviously a tech device, I suppose, or an app, a platform where people can connect and offer their services, and people can access those services. So more broadly, I think the gig economy has come to mean something which is about technology. Technology is connecting two sides there, but also I think gig work has come to mean something where people can access flexible work, short-term work that maybe supports a main job. There's another term which we hear a lot, which is the side hustle. So I think it's come to mean something that is smart, flexible, not long-term, fits in around the person that's doing it. And these are all obviously positives. And then at the same time, obviously, gig work, has a negative side that we read a lot about, and that tends to be to do with workers' rights, and obviously we'll come on to that kind of thing. So I think it's a term that's evolved. I think gig platforms are obviously powered by technology, and the gig economy has come to really fuse these two worlds. Short-term work that you can access easily, but powered by technology. I'd be interesting to hear, what your definitions are, and how maybe that varies in India versus sort of my maybe more UK, US, global thoughts on that. So I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Dr. Mishra, what are your perspective and thoughts on gig economy and workforce? Sir, you're on mute.
Thank you. So, thank you, Kaushik. Fantastic. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Always a pleasure to share thoughts on contemporary HR practices with like-minded people. And yeah, I think Ellie has very well articulated and set the context what exactly this gig economy is all about and what gig means. But I have three tiny stories, and very, very tiny ones. There are three stakeholders fundamentally, I believe, who are important when you talk about gig economy. Number one, in India specifically, when we say that we have this demographic dividend of having more and more young people joining us, what it means is 70% of our workforce is relatively young. So what it means, hence, is these are the people, I don't want to stereotype them, but these are the people who typically have a mindset of, can I get more flexibility? I'm not married to any one company. I don't mind, I'm a subject matter expert, I will hop from company to company, but this is my core area. That's one trend I'm seeing evolving. Second one, if you talk about seasoned professionals who already have got, let's say, 20 years of experience, their aspiration is to get into something on their own. So that is also is evolving in India. And then the reality is, once you are at a senior level, you are holding senior, different comp bands and subject to more job losses at that level. So that's a second trend. Third thing is, in any unprecedented time like COVID, what we are going through, there are a lot of pressure on cost arbitration, a lot of pressures on headcount rationalization. And hence, startups, for them, the proposition is, there are experts available in the market. You don't need to hire anybody as a full-time employee, pay them something, and still you can have their expertise. So your employer's long-term commitment to gig would be bare minimal in that scheme of thing. And mind you, we are talking about a global workforce, global economy, which is estimated as $260 billion. In India, it's close to $25 billion. But the good news for India is we feature amongst the top 5 global economies who is using gig economy. So you have US, you have China, you have Japan, you have Mexico, and the 5th one is India. During this crisis, I have seen that, there is more kind of momentum that has built specifically in gig economy. So fantastic, a lot of hope. It's win-win for multiple stakeholders, and hence strongly believe it is here to stay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mishra, for your thoughts. Mr. Vinay, if you can just share some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, first of all, my compliments to Teamlease for picking up a very important topic while we put India back to work. And also my best wishes to everybody who is here on the 74th Independence Eve. Wishing everybody a very, very happy Independence Day. And independence really, means independence of thoughts, independence of approaches, independence of how we look at changing, evolving perspectives in this world. And to me, if this whole topic of gig economy, everybody understands what a gig workforce is. Elle really told very well of how short-term jobs can be, termed as gig. Dr. Anil Mishra gave a perspective of how there are different variants of what we do. In my mind, I think, there was a term called as insecurity that was used a lot in the 1980s and 1990s. With millennials and Gen Z, there is a term called as FOMO that is used. So gig has always been there. About 70% of Indian corporates have used some format of gig workforce, and have been using them in some format. It's not a new term. It is just that we like to call it, in newer words, so that it's just the in thing. But the good thing that I see the pandemic has brought onto us is greater sense of common sense, where people can evaluate jobs that can be done remotely, that they can evaluate jobs that are in need of flexibility, and they can evaluate jobs that need not really have people work, in one particular location. For instance, we service customers thousands of miles away when we give them software services, but we do not like people to be 200 kilometers away to do their job for us, right? So that perspective has changed, and we are opening up to this faster, and definitely it gives a lot of opportunities from an employment perspective, thanks to the gig economy.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vinay. But I think I'll head straight to that questions. But I think you mentioned insecurity and flexibility. But Ms. Thakur, I wanted to so basically, currently there are a lot of thoughts in the mind of people. Are the gig workers employees? That's one of the biggest questions which is hovering around in everybody's mind. Are they actual employees, or what are they? So that's the kind of question which I think you should please help us with the answer.
I think it's a really important question. I think it's one that has been asked a lot more recently, because I think originally the first gig platforms really did just connect two groups of people, our users and providers. But it's become more complicated than that. And actually, this is a very timely discussion, because obviously we've all, as a gig economy enthusiasts, been reading what's been happening in California this very week around Uber and Lyft, who have always claimed that they are not employers and they are merely connecting these two groups, and in that sense don't have responsibility, or don't have to act as employers and provide obviously all the things that employers should provide to protect the people that work for them. But the new Ab5 rule in California has ruled that this is not the case, and what they're claiming is that the Uber and Lyft do control the drivers on their platform. So in that sense, they are employers. So the lines have started to become blurred, because as soon as platforms decide that they are acting as employers, or the law decides that for them, then they have extra responsibilities. But then maybe that means that the drivers or the gig workers on other types of platforms cease to have the autonomy that maybe has attracted them to gig work in the first place. So at what point do we draw that line and say the platform has become an employer? Is it maybe the amount of control they have, or whether people can work for other platforms? At what point do people actually stop being just somebody that uses a platform and actually come to work for that company? And I think this debate is not one that is going to end anytime soon. And I've been certainly following the news this week, and it's really just developing hour by hour. I think that Uber and Lyft are going to have to cease to actually operate in California for a while until this is resolved. But it certainly is going to have an impact globally, and obviously Uber is present in India as well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how other countries respond to this. And I do think also more broadly, not just about Uber and Lyft, that the gig economy is evolving. It's a very fast moving model, and certainly one that we're all adopting. But in a way, governments and legislation and regulation haven't necessarily caught up with that. So I don't think it's always just about the responsibility of the platform. I think that governments around, and certainly financial services, insurance services, need to catch up with something that is moving very fast. So we can't necessarily blame the platforms. They're innovating, but there needs to be other companies and governments around this fast-moving model, so that everything can evolve at the same pace. So I think that's an important part of it too. Not to just blame the disruptors in the middle of this, if we're not necessarily catching up at the same pace.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. But Mr. Vinay, if I come back to you on so India. So for at least a couple of years now, so there are a lot of gig workforce in India right now. How do you see the percentage, or how what's the kind of percentage people are working in that, and where do you see India growing in Indian gig workforce?
I'll just sort of add on to a point that Elle made on how governments and the financial services sector also needs to catch up on how gig workforce really shapes up. And I'll give you simple examples. Today, when we look at a gig workforce and we look at statutory compliances as far as India is concerned, they're still pretty rigid. I cannot have 3 different provident fund accounts active, or I cannot have 3 different employment insurances active. Now, possibly, if there is anything that needs to happen on that side, is to create capsule size compliances or capsule size benefits for people. So if I am, for example, attached to, let me take Uber for 4 hours in a day, I have insurance for only those 4 hours, or I get paid a statutory compliance only for that 4 hours. And similarly, if I attach myself to another cab aggregator, then I get that benefit. So overall, I'm not losing out. Also, the platform is not penalized because they cannot have one size fits all. So they also have that flexibility. So I think if there's anything that needs to change to enable this workforce, this is what we need to do, because there's enough innovation happening. There are enough people out there who are trying to create opportunities, and these are going to enable them further. As far as India is concerned, and like Dr. Anil Mishra just mentioned, that we are in the top 5 of the gig workforce already. We account to 40% of the gig workers across the globe, by the way. And this number is going to only increase to anywhere between 55 to 60% over the next decade, because a lot of opportunities will open up. And the pandemic, what the pandemic has done is, which would have happened in say 20 years, will now happen in 10 years. It's accelerated that graph of change, because a lot of things have just happened. And crisis usually teaches us a lot of things, right? When there's crisis, change management becomes that much more simpler. Even if you would have thought that we could have done this earlier, it's crisis that makes us take that call eventually and move in that direction. So that's how we're going to grow. 55 to 60% is what I anticipate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trivedi. So for all the participants, you can have the Q&A, use the Q&A for asking the questions. We will take the questions at the end of the session, around 15 minutes. From around 2:15, we'll take the question and answers. Dr. Mishra, I think Vinay was telling that the flexibility work hours and can I be employed by 3 employees? But then if you are a business owner, how do you track that guy for 4 hours or let's say 2 hours? I mean, or their status, and how do you would make sure that they are actually working for you, not actually working for somebody else, because he might have 3-4 employers.
I think brilliant question. Thanks for asking me that question, Kaushik. But before I answer that, just to continue where Vinay left it, I think see, statutory provision wise, I do not see any challenges, specifically talking about India. The larger challenge is social and societal challenges. For example, what I mean by that is, people working as a full-time employee versus, people working on multiple assignments. Unfortunately, in Indian context, I don't know about other developed economies, but in India, that's still a taboo. People try and, attach a stigma saying that, okay, you are not employed basically anywhere. You are not a full-time employee. So you are not working anywhere. So that mindset definitely needs to change. In addition to what Vinay said, that, government of India also need to safeguard the interest of, those gig workers in terms of statutory and other provisions. Now, coming back to your question, Kaushik, when I'm hiring a gig resource, I'm not interested that, that person puts in 4 hours of punch in and punch out time. For me, because, I'm talking about meritocratic setup. I'm talking about a culture where performance matters. That the whole concept or genesis of, gig is all around this. So long as an individual is able to fulfill the target within my stipulated period of time, I don't mind if he comes to my workplace or goes to a competition or working from the beautiful beaches of Goa. I don't care, so long as they fulfill my objective. And we believe in a detachable attachment behavior here. So I pay you, and in turn, you are rendering some services. How you do it, 6 hours you take, 10 hours you take, none of my business. From where you are working. Now, yes, as a company, I'm concerned about my information not getting leaked. And there are plenty of provisions to safeguard, the data security piece. So long as that is done, I think we should be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. But if you look at it, so it's now that people are talking about gig economy and gig workforce. I mean, earlier, at least the Uber and the Lyft, Ola, Swiggy, all of them are there for last 4, 5 years, 6 years now. But Ms. Thakur, I'll want. If you would love to answer this, that why is that gig economy is in the news recently? I mean, then though the companies are there for long, but then it's now that everybody's talking about gig economy now.
Yeah, and I pick up really on what Vinay was saying there, and I just think he's absolutely right that, you know, a crisis brings opportunity, and we are seeing change at pace. And for all of us who advocate the platform economy and gig work and the sharing economy, this is something that, although it has come out of a very difficult situation, is something that we could only dream of in terms of mass adoption of technology and platform models. So I think that this huge discussion around the gig economy in the last 6 months, it certainly has come out of a crisis. But you know, it's you know, it's something that we couldn't have possibly predicted. So I think this is why the gig economy has been in the news recently. But also, I think that people are you know, looking around them and thinking, you know, many countries are now announcing that they, you know, including the UK, are now in recession because of the pandemic. So the actual effects of what's been happening in the last 6 months are really starting to hit now. So in the UK, we're having some of the big employers are announcing mass redundancies. We can see this happening in other countries, and people, you know, are looking for additional income streams. And because they've been adopting technology, people have obviously, you know, been working from home. They've been using Zoom. You know, these are people that maybe wouldn't have actually looked to their phones or their laptops for these types of things in the past. I mean, simple things like people who are doing their shopping deliveries online now, who'd never done it before. I mean, I've been giving this example. You know, my mum has Skype, and you know, this is unprecedented. So lots of people using technology, looking for additional income streams, and also I think the fact that people are now connecting more with their local communities, whether they're doing that through Facebook groups or you know, apps. There's a big platform called Nextdoor, which seems to become more popular because, you know, there are people in their local area that might have you know, a need for support during the pandemic, if they're in quarantine, that type of thing. And all that leads to people understanding that there's small jobs that they can do and access, maybe delivery jobs, that type of thing. So lots of things are moving people towards the gig economy, and you know, it is because of a crisis. So alongside all the stuff that's happening in California with the Ab5, I think that the reason that the gig economy is in the news at the moment is because there's many factors as a result of the pandemic that are pushing people towards this kind of work. And you know, that is a positive side to what's been happening in the world, definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taka. So I'll come back to Mr. Vinay. So I think yeah, like Mr. Taka was talking about different kinds of job being taken up. But then has the company started? I mean, so there are a lot of talking going on the blue collar work, but how has the gig work given by the companies changed? Is it still a low value kind of a work that used to get outsourced, or is it still is there something changed within the companies?
I think this is a brilliant question that you asked, Kaushik, because earlier when we used to look at gig workforce or temporary workforce or contractual freelance workforce, we would evaluate from a perspective of cost, compliance, and permanent versus temporary in nature. Now that is moving rapidly to expertise, convenience, on-demand jobs. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples that will give you that perspective, that it's no longer just those lower end of the jobs that are getting you know, in a freelance or a gig mode. Look at these like a Live Space or a Homelane. Look at these home interior companies that are there. They are providing a brilliant digital marketplace to get professionals like interior designers, plumbers, masons, all your interior works, which is all blue collar, but they're getting into their organized segment. They're getting, because they have technology penetration, they are able to get a lot of tech initiatives through these people who are on a gig model, and get projects delivered. We've not even thought about that. Or look at services, that come through digital platforms like a haircut from HouseJoy that you get at your home and have been sort of using it. So these are specialist jobs. They're not really lower end of the jobs, and these are going to be in demand. So, and the spectrum is wide, from interior designers to civil engineers to, getting your house cleaned. All of that is going to actually be covered in this new spectrum, which is why it's no longer going to be a small, minuscule number of people, but a wide range of services that will get covered.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vinay. So I think what Vinay was saying is different kinds of jobs. Now the companies have started making sure that even the gig jobs are kind of treated well, or given the status what it should be. But Dr. Mishra, in this current scenario of pandemic, there were a lot of migrants who were working as construction workers, who moved out, and I think at least in Bangalore, Delhi, and Bombay, the discussion, and there were a lot of real estate companies luring them to come back to. They were giving flight tickets, they were giving 3x the money to make sure they come back and start the work. So are these the potential gig employers in the construction sector, where people are looking to them to hire them, because to make sure that so obviously there's a timeline to close those real estate and the apartments. So is there anything, they will be termed as the gig employees, or how are they will be, because they will be mostly people salaried on a day-to-day basis? How do you think around this?
Yeah, difficult question for me to answer, because I'm not an authority to comment on the sector, the real estate sector. However, I believe they are contractual employees, definitely. But yeah, in terms of the impact, in terms of what Vinay was mentioning, the specialist element, I believe it is little confined to the scope is little confined, in fact. So typically, gig means, in my mind, Vinay very well articulated. But anybody across rank and file, why not product managers? Why not a chief technology officer? Why not chief human resources officer? Why not UX and UI designers? Why not let's say CAD CAM expert? So they are there in every sector. They are there in every level. So it's not sector agnostic. It's not confined to a specific level. Wherever you do not have your core competency as an organization, wherever you feel that this is a specialist job, and you do not think that this is a perennial assignment, this is for a temporary time period you don't want to go ahead and invest, and hence these are the experts available in the market. So in India, I don't know, sorry Ali, but in India we have a company called Urban Clap, which is urban company, I guess, right now. You need a electrician, you need a AC technician, so that caters to a specific category of people. But if you need a chief technology officer or chief finance officer, probably they would not. That's not their core competency. But all of them in the entire scheme of things, across rank and file, across levels, gig assignments are available, and that's how I would want to look at that. And yeah, this is a necessity right now. Talking about Kaushik, the real estate, the contract workers, right now there is a necessity, and you are under a lot of pressure as a builder to deliver your units on time, and hence wherever this resource is available, you go pay them multiple 3 times the salary normally you would pay in a happy time, and then have them. So that's a desperation need right now, and hence probably they are flying them out and ensuring that customer is happy end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Kaushik, I'll just add a point to Dr. Mishra's point. When we look at aspirationally, how do we want the gig workforce to look like, etc., etc. I look at it, as a life cycle. So gig workforce was born many years back, but never grew. Has started growing in the last couple of years more rapidly than it ever did. Obviously, our expectation is that it'll be a full-grown tree or a full-grown human being. I think in the next 5-8 years, you will see rapid maturity in the kind of opportunities that are going to be available in the gig workforce, and we'll be surprised to see the kind of people that are going to move in the gig way. That's how I look at future.
Okay, thank you.
Kaushik, I was just going to add to that as well, because I think what Vinay was saying there is very interesting, because I do think it's evolving, but I think the definitions need to evolve as well, because I think for a lot of people, the term gig worker would probably mean an unskilled worker through to, I just think that term doesn't really necessarily encompass the full spectrum, because we also have other terms in there, which I don't know if you use in India so much, but when we think in terms of consultancy or freelance as well, there are some other terms in there, but these tend to apply to white collar workers. And then I think the term gig worker tends to maybe fit more around the blue collar. But I mean, I would like to see maybe the term gig work to apply to all of this as gig platforms evolve, so that everyone can really dip in and out of that whole spectrum of work. But it's not necessarily the case right now that I think that the terms freelance and consultants really mix in with the term gig. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to hear how much those terms are used in India as well, because I think somebody that maybe is a freelance consultant, maybe a business consultant, or the type of examples that Dr. Misra was giving just before about UX or UI developers, these types of people, I don't necessarily think they would identify with the term gig work. They'd maybe see themselves as freelance consultants. So it's about how we really make sure that these definitions are working for everyone, because definitions are more important than maybe we would think, because I think there are associations there, and how people feel positively or negatively about the gig economy is really important for its success.
Yeah, right. I think what Mr. Thakkar and Vinay both and obviously Dr. Mishra, you were saying is why is that white collars are not looked at as gig workers, or what they think around being a consultant or being a gig worker or being a freelancer. But then since we run those two job portals, and then one of them is being the blue collared, where we see that the white collar percentage of people applying to the blue collar jobs, or the jobs, if I term it as jobs, have grown up. I mean, the last 5-6 months, there the percentage is really high, and I'm seeing. So where earlier it was 0.001%, we have moved to about close to 10% of white collar people applying to jobs where they feel they are flexible, they can work around it. But then with the people applying on white collar to our blue collar, or vice versa, there might be a lot of challenges which they might face. So for a gig job, there are a lot of advantage and disadvantage as well. So Dr. Mishra, what do you think would be the challenges from an Indian context right now for the gig jobs?
Interesting data, Kaushik. That it used to be in decimals, and right now it's hitting roughly around 10%. But my counter question to that would be, is that because there are plenty of job losses, I do not have any option in the market, and there is a demand and supply huge gap, and once market opens up, and again some percentage of this white collar gig would again move to full-time employment, that is something which we need to watch out. But having said that, since there is tremendous potential this economy provides to all category of people, irrespective of their experience, number of years of experience, or age, or whether blue collar or white collar. Definitely there is a huge potential, and it's going to grow thanks to this change. But yeah, I believe that is acting as a catalyst at this moment. So that's how I look at it. But the only challenge that I see is as I already kind of shared this, from social stigma standpoint, how we are and what we are going to do, and should we not create a lobby which would also promote employers to go and hire gig workers? So that's probably people are little hesitant, there are plenty of challenges with regard to information security, with regard to antecedent verification. What happens if I hire somebody without doing my reference check, but I end up hiring somebody with criminal background. So there are plenty of tick boxes that we definitely need to consider before we hire, and that probably would give a little bit of confidence to employers, because the proposition is wonderful for all stakeholders. It's win-win. So I do not see, but these are the pain points, along with government support, along with how we can safeguard the interest of gig workers. How do we decide? For example, right? Anil gets X amount and Kaustubh gets X plus N. And what are the variables which would determine what is my hourly rate? So those things are in a very, very fluid state. And hence, I see these are the potential challenges that definitely need to be addressed. And if done, then, we would move towards more organized way of dealing with gig economy and gig workers.
Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Ms. Thakur, so Dr. Mishra told about us since India is relatively new in the gig economy space, and when I mentioned that in 5 to 8 years we'll be kind of next level. Obviously, Dr. Mishra also mentioned that we are like fifth in the world right now. But what are the challenges currently? Do you think the globally gig economy or gig workforce will face, or is there any challenges, or we only see a brighter side of the gig economy?
No, I mean, I think there are challenges, and I know we've talked about some of these before. I think that the issue around the role of platforms as employers versus impartial platforms that just connect two sides. I think this is something that is going to be a problem until it's resolved. And I don't think there's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think that different countries are going to have different issues, and their governments need to align with this evolving model, as we've seen obviously in California. I think that the identity piece as well, that Dr. Mishra was talking about, identity checking, making sure that the technology there evolves, because I mean, through my work with marketplace risk, I've seen some, and heard about some incredible ways that fraudsters can infiltrate these platforms using fake identities. I mean, the technology that they're using is incredible. These sort of, it's not even identity theft anymore. It's sort of creating these sort of fake personas, which is terrifying. So again, technology needs to evolve. There are some really innovative companies that are evolving alongside the gig economy to provide these safety checks, these identity checks, and the type of sort of fraud prevention that gig economy platforms need as well. But I think challenges are going to be varied, but one of them is that sometimes the platforms aren't evolving quickly enough to keep up with demand, because we're obviously seeing a huge increase in demand for people to sign up and do gig work, particularly in these difficult times in periods of recession. And also we've talked about financial and insurance factors as well. And I've seen some really interesting companies evolving that support gig workers, and actually help them to manage that irregular income, and help them to develop a pension plan, and get a credit rating, these types of things. But these are small startups that are really just beginning, whereas the gig platforms are evolving at pace. So I think one of the biggest challenges is making sure that all these innovative companies, because they will connect, it's an ecosystem, it's not just the platforms, they can all evolve at the same pace, because that's really important. It's not a kind of race to the finish line here. We need the identity checks, we need the financial companies and the insurance companies and the governments, everyone to kind of finish at the end of the race at the same point. We're not trying to we've got to work together, I think, more than anything.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Thakur. Mr. Vinay, I'll come back to you, but I think so on one of the pain points which is obviously heard across is the delay in payments. I mean, I think in the gig economy, the gig workforce, it is still predominantly it is on the only the payments. Both I think from the freelancer side of it as well as the firms, there might be delay in payments and all. So, and which it's kind of lack of professionalism is what people can talk about. But how do you think the system should evolve, and what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's very painful when we do not treat human beings as human beings. I think this whole perspective of collarization of workforce has become so rigid in our minds that even our treatment towards those scholars have a differentiated approaches. What needs to definitely change, and I see green shoots and a lot of things are changing in that direction, is we need to start treating people as people. The minute I am talking about another human being, my approach is going to be very different, because I'll be high on empathy, I'll be high on understanding, I'll be high on logic. The minute I look at it from a perspective that, oh, he's just a gig worker, suddenly the human part goes out. So if there's anything that needs to happen when you are dealing with these things, and if companies needs to change their approach, they have to ask themselves only one question: can we treat everybody as human beings, and therefore put ourselves in their shoes and deal with them? A lot of perspective will change. That's my view and appeal to a lot of leaders who possibly are also listening in when they look at these differentiated workforces.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Trivedi. So coming back to payments and all, but then there are a lot of things which the in minds of the gig workers or consultants or freelancers are that first, I think Ms. Tucker mentioned that what is the employee status, but then with the employee status, the benefits of a company. So should the gig workers also have the same kind of benefits like a permanent job holder in a company, or Dr. Mishra, is it that the benefits should be different to the gig employees?
No, the very concept of a gig employee is, probably, these guys are not here for long term. And hence, you talk about the leaves, you talk about other retirement benefits that would not be really applicable to this category of people. But having said that, Ellie has brought in a fantastic point, and that talks about the insurance, the medical, and similarly, Vinay talked about, can we be human, irrespective of, whether they are full-time employee, they are here for a very short period of time. Irrespective of that, can we treat them well? That remains the underlying philosophy. And the way you treat, and it depends on companies' value system also. But irrespective of that, treatment to all, with all respect, treat people the way you would like to be treated. That is the underlying concept, and that should not be compromised. And I believe it's a criminal offense not to release payment, not to take care of them, and then that is you're differentiating, you're discriminating people. So that is something which personally I do not kind of approve as a HR leader. But I don't know what future holds for all of us, and I'm sure in the form of legal or labor reforms, if Government of India, Ministry of HRD is thinking of having something, because they have realized that this is here to stay and this is the future.
Okay.
I just have 30 seconds to add here, Kaushik. I think the way we should look at it is, when we talk of benefits, we talk of being deprived. But when we talk of flexibility, we want all the flexibility when it comes to the kind of working that we want to do, right? Now, everything cannot come to you on a platter. So if you want flexibility, then you take that flexibility. If you want benefits, then you sign up for a program that will give you benefits. But that said, I think, which the point that I mentioned earlier as well, I think we need to understand that if your job is bite-sized, we need to have benefits also that can be bite-sized, so it sort of matches to the job that people are doing. So that is an area that I think will evolve eventually, and we will start seeing that as well.
Okay, good. So, Ms. Tucker, one of the questions which I think came up is so if I'm a very small firm, should I only hire 2 freelancers and get my app developed, or is there a difference between how that I should have a mix of people, of permanent employees and freelancers, or should if the work is done with two freelancers, can I get away with it? What's your thought on the permanent and gig workers? If there's a balance, or how is it we should look at?
Well, I think that there's a huge advantage for small startup companies to access the gig economy for the talent that they need. And this is something that, just a decade ago, wouldn't have been possible and was a huge strain when someone was setting up a company, because how would they access the talent they needed? They needed to employ people. So when they employed people, they needed to provide them with holiday pay, sick pay, a pension, a desk permanently in an office. Therefore, they needed that specific office space. But now startups with maybe who are bootstrapping, who are, really pre-investment and are trying to get maybe a tech product or a SaaS product or something off the ground. They need developers, but they don't necessarily have the office space or the financial resources to provide them with a regular pay and a contract and keep that going. So I think this is where the gig economy really comes into its own, because it could be that the talent is needed over a short period of time. The company can access that and avoid putting people on the payroll. And that's not an avoidance of responsibility. That's tapping into talent when they need it, and not giving someone a job when and giving them a sort of false sense of security and having to let them go after 6 months. And I think this is another, to me, it's one of the biggest advantages of the gig economy. What it allows people to do is to monetize a talent that they have that maybe they wouldn't have been able to use as a full-time method of employment. So if you have a few talents, you can sort of put those together and create a kind of portfolio of income, whereas maybe one of them individually wouldn't have been enough to get a job based on. And 10, 15 years ago, if you were good at a certain thing, then you would either, it's the classic expression, I always think it relates so well to the gig economy: don't give up your day job. And, it's like when you hear someone singing and they say, yeah, don't give up your day job. And it's like, now you can, because if you can do a little bit of that and a little bit of a few other things, you don't have to sit doing a job that you maybe don't enjoy that much, and you can monetize several of your talents. And I think that, to me, is the beauty, because you can work more flexibly, you can work around your children, you can work from home, and you can have these multiple income streams. So sorry, going back to your question, I would say for a company, especially an early stage company, then I would say definitely get your gig workers in, get your projects done, and it's a great way for your company to succeed and to to support gig workers with talents at the same time. As Dr. Misra has said a couple of times during this discussion, and I totally agree with him, it's a win-win. And if it's done properly, obviously.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ka. Mr. Vinay. So I think the discussion of we heard from Dr. Mishra and Mr. Ka about the challenges and also white collar being taking up the blue collar jobs or the gig jobs. What do you think would be the advantages for the gig workers taking up gig jobs, or a white collar taking up gig jobs, or a consultant or a freelancer to do these kind of jobs? What do you think would be the advantage for them?
I think advantages of working in a gig format are way too many. Point number one, not just flexibility, you also get a variety of work that you can do, which means that you're not limited to just doing a set of job, but you actually have a lot of variety. That means it accelerates your learning. That means it also helps you gain wider perspective. And that means that it makes you a stronger, experienced expertise in whatever you're doing. So if I have to give you an example, if I'm working in a company doing a particular job, I'll take possibly 10 years to understand a certain thing in full scale. But as a gig workforce, I may do that in 3 or 4 years because of the variety that I would have in my workforce. So I think there are these tremendous benefits that the gig workforce has as far as the worker is concerned, or the employee is concerned.
Okay. Thank you, Vinay. So one of the questions which came in, Dr. Mishra, was wouldn't gig force cause social insecurity, fear of being loss of job? That's one of the questions which came in.
No, in gig economy, typically we are not promising anybody that there is going to be lifelong employment. This is for you are a subject matter expert, you have some special skills, and we are hiring you for a temporary period of time. Come, gig, exit. That is the intent. So there is no concept of loss of job. You are available in market, you are rendering your services. Basis, how many takers are there, what is the requirement, then you would keep on moving from one company to other.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Ms. Thakur, one of the questions which came in, should there be a special compensation plan for gig employees? I think across the globe, this question would be valid. Is there any special compensation plan should be there, or how is it?
Yeah, I think that, it's really essential that, and I think, there are governments around the world that are sort of, almost ignoring this, this fast moving new model. And this has been brought sharply into view by the pandemic. And it's interesting because this happened in the UK and the US, that when suddenly lockdown came, the government announced that employers and employees would be supported by the government. We had a furlough scheme in the UK. So immediately everyone that was in a job, a PAYE, a pay-as-you-earn tax, permanent contracted job, would be supported by the government. And huge amounts of gig workers, and I'm talking in terms of, people that maybe wouldn't see themselves as gig workers, freelancers, consultants, they said, well, what about us? And the same thing, happened in the US. So there was a huge outcry there. And I think that, again, it's a way that the pandemic, a way this crisis has brought change at pace, because governments have realized that such a huge proportion of people are working in this freelance capacity. They have to offer support to them in the same way that they have done to regular employees. So within weeks, both the US and the UK governments brought out a support scheme for freelance or gig workers to help them through this difficult period. And so, we can't go back from that sort of change. That now has been set in stone. And suddenly gig workers, freelance workers are on an equal footing in terms of the government's view on support with regular employees. And I think that's been a really important move. So in terms of a support package for them, I think that change, 2020 will be obviously a memorable year for many reasons, but I think for the gig economy, it's when governments have actually noticed that this is something that's going on and something that they have to meet the needs of, definitely.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mr. Vinay. I think we're talking about gig workforce. So is it very necessary for the companies to kind of adopt gig workforce because it is catching up as a trend, or we are saying we are forecasting this is the next big workforce, or is this a kind that this kind of workforce is beneficial for any particular kind of sector, or how is it? What's your thoughts on it?
It's again a very interesting point you make, and I spoke about insecurities and FOMO, right? And I'll give you that as a context, that if you are looking at a workforce that needs a certain expertise that you don't need full time, if you're looking at a workforce that needs something which is on demand, which you're not able to fulfill possibly in a normal scenario, or if you're looking at also providing some convenience basis how your work is, you go for a gig workforce. What needs and what is of paramount importance for companies is not to get into a gig workforce mode because it's a trend. And the minute you do that, it's a disaster. You expect a gig workforce to behave like a permanent worker. There is a mismatch, there are problems, and then you will go out and say that gig workforce doesn't work out for us, and it's a big failure, and a whole host of things that will come up. So what's important is you need to evaluate jobs. You need to know what jobs needs to be permanent, what jobs can be provided flexibility, what jobs can be contractual, and basis that you divide those opportunities and go out in the market. That's one approach. Second approach is an experimentation approach, where you say that I will look at 10-20% of my jobs which are going to come through the gig workforce, thereby reducing my headcount by so much percentage, thereby optimizing my cost by so much percentage, and doing certain things for the 80%. So you have to use logic and not do it just because it's FOMO or insecurity. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Trivedi. So one last question, and then I think we'll take the final thoughts around this from all our 3 panelists. Since the current, Dr. Mishra, in the current scenario, somebody has been asking if the company is not able to pay this consultant as per agreement, and if these consultants want to work with a competitor on contractual basis, is it okay, or should the companies allow them, or is it right? Or can the companies go into legal contract with these independent workers?
See, it's a very technical question, very tricky to answer even for me. But I believe that when you employ a gig worker, there is a contract that normally you sign, where you talk about the hourly rate, or the project timeline and all those stuff. Whenever, whether gig or otherwise, whenever there is a violation to that employment contract, of course, as an employer, I have that right to go ahead and initiate legal action. But if somebody has not paid, then that's a very tricky one. So of course, as an employee, I can drag the employer into in the courtroom. So these are certain stuff, very, very contextual. But gig economy meaning typically, I'm free bird. Now I have my expertise. I will choose where I can go and do that. Of course, within that 4 boundaries of my professional ethics. The moment I compromise that, my reputation is also at stake. And it's a very small world, whether a gig or a full-time employee. People would get to know that I do not have the right kind of professional ethics, and hence it would pose some sort of threat on my employability as a gig worker with somebody else. So that is a non-negotiable thing. Employment contract is there. It has to be fulfilled by, it has to be honored by both the parties. Any violation by either of them, they are free to go to court of law.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. Ms. Thakur, and for Mr. Trivedi and Dr. Mishra, I think we'll take the closing remarks from all of you. I think we are short of time here. 1 minute to each of you. Ms. Thakur, what would you close with for the participants and the people on YouTube also are watching us? So what is your?
I would say this is the gig economy is part of a really broad discussion here. It's about the future of work, and it is changing at pace, particularly because of 2020. It's not just about gig platforms, it's about remote working, it's about flexible working, it's about working at home, and there's a huge evolution taking place. So I would say let's just keep this conversation going, and let's talk globally like we are today, and share knowledge, and make sure that the rights of workers are respected, and that governments and policymakers are actually aware and constantly nudged towards making changes that support everyone, because this is our workforce and this is a really important discussion. So, and thank you for inviting me to be part of the discussion today.
Thank you, Ms. Thakur. Mr. Vinay.
I think so. 1970s in India was all about getting a government job. 1980s, 1990s was all about getting PSU opportunities. 2000s was all about getting possibly banking jobs, but private sector had started, coming up in a big way. Software services sector started coming up in a big way. 2020, we are now talking of contractual workforce or gig workforce. In 20, 30 years, we'll possibly go back full circle and go back to government jobs. So this is a evolving trend like a banyan tree. We are continuously evolving and growing. We should not look at this as permanent, nor we should look at the past as permanent or future as predictable. we have to take every day as it comes. Currently, I see that the gig workforce has a lot of opportunities, and you should explore them if you want to be in the long haul. But eventually, even that's going to change.
Thank you, Mr. Vinay. Dr. Mishra.
I think both, I would agree to Ellie as well as Vinay, whatever they said, I agree to that. But my concluding remark would be, I saw one question with regard to employer loyalty. So I'm saying whether you are full-time, you are a gig assignment, nobody is loyal these days, specifically in a digitized economy, to the employer. As an employer, I'm happy if your loyalty is towards your profession. If you are an engineer, if you are doing your job wonderfully well, if you are a doctor, if you do it with all moral ethics, then that should be good enough. You got to be loyal towards your profession. Forget about your loyalty towards employer. Please don't hire any gig employees if somebody is expecting that he or she would be loyal towards employer. Nobody is expecting.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Mishra. I think it was a wonderful session. All three of you were fantastic, and I think what the participants and people looking at the session would take away a lot of things from this. There were questions answered on stability. There were questions answered on the advantages, the challenges right now. What are the things people should do? But I think currently Dr. Mishra also said India is number 5th. So globally also the gig workforce is coming up. So I think a lot of opportunities for all to take away. A lot of jobs being currently available right now in the gig workforce space. So I think thanks for Dr. Mishra, Mr. Trivedi, and Ms. Tucker for your time, and thank you very much. We are all honored to have you here. Thank you. Thanks a ton.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Kaushik.